All right, welcome to the first episode of Hexagon Astrology Podcast. We've got a couple guests today. First is Heather Renee Horton, who will be discussing Saturn and Capricorn. And then we're going to take a musical break and bring on Jason Fleming of SagittarianMind.com to talk about the Chiron return of hip-hop. And then after that, we'll take another musical break, and then I've got a installment number 2 of The Proprietaries, where we discuss astrology by looking at the charts of CIA proprietary companies, partners, and contractors. And we look at those companies, partners, and contractors by utilizing astrology. So, with that said, hope you enjoy this episode. Heather Renee Horton of Myth Mandala and numerous other enterprises. Miss Horton.
Yes.
Yes, you are on the air.
Oh, awesome. Hi.
What's going on?
What's going on? I'm in a cloudy day in Florida.
In Florida. So are you on your Sagittarian, Super Sag? So you're traveling. You're on the open road. Your natural home.
Of course.
Now, are you in a lowrider?
You what, huh?
You are you're in a lowrider.
In a lowrider?
Yes, because lowrider culture is Sag with Taurus moon like yourself.
Okay.
Or it was it was started by a person of Sag sun, Taurus moon, and I think Venus in Capricorn, just like you.
Lowrider meaning like hydraulics and neon lights?
Yes, like the hydraulic
assisted.
assisted.
Dear God, no.
Come on! Look, Wonder Woman's got her airplane, and now we got lowriders, and I'm like, there's something about Sagittarius, you guys, and all your high-performance vehicles, be they the invisible airplane or hydraulic-assisted lowrider automobiles.
Oh, good God. My Venus and Capricorn's far too snobby for that. So is my moon.
Well, it could be like a fancy. Some of them are really fancy. They're like rolling pieces of art. Like some are really nice ones.
Rolling pieces of art.
They are, though. Some of them. Seriously, though. When they really put a lot of effort, I guess that makes Sagittarius rolling, likes to roll, and Taurus moon pieces of art. So anyhow, so you're on the open road. Have you any update on your presidential ambitions?
I mean, if anybody's game at this point, I could throw a hat into the ring, couldn't I?
Yes. Let's see. What would your would you have any particular issues that would be your hot button issues?
I mean, to be honest, I think despite my strong presentation, I am far too sensitive to take on such a role. Neptune's conjunct my sun natally.
Well, that's good for politics, though. Neptune. I was reading something the other day about Neptune. A lot of politicians have Neptune placements. Because if you think about it, in Neptune, whatever a politician is, it's like actually being like a priest, kind of, sort of, a political priest. Like, oh, we'll elect this person, and maybe they'll magically make things better.
Huh. I don't know. I don't think politics is my path, though.
No. Well, now
as
you are
politically voiced as I can be. I don't know.
Now, if Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson runs for president, he wanted to appoint you to do something with Health and Human Services. Would you be interested in that appointment?
That sounds a little more the right fit.
A little more. So let Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson handle the presidential stuff, and you could be the head of Health and Human Services or something like that. There's got to be
I'm all right with that.
Cabinet level appointment.
Okay with.
Hey, so we're going to talk Saturn and Capricorn. Saturn's in Capricorn. You're a Capricornian individual.
Saturn rules my life. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I was looking into last time Saturn was in Capricorn was the Bay Bridge World Series. You, of course, also know a thing or two about Major League Baseball.
A little bit.
And last time in '89 we had that. It was the Bay Bridge Series, Oakland A's, SF Giants, and it was the Earthquake Series. And so, of course, that's Capricorn, geologic structures. But then what I found out is they had actually, that off season, the previous off season, right when Saturn had gone into Capricorn, some of the people in charge of the stadium were very alarmed about the possibility of it collapsing during an earthquake, and they retrofitted it, and that ended up preventing massive casualties when the earthquake did happen about 8 or 9
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was like, well, that's a good example of Saturn and Capricorn.
Saturn and Capricorn.
Can you think of anything that is at least
I
hopeful?
mean, if you're going to talk baseball, the first thing to talk about is home field advantage.
Home field advantage, okay.
I feel like, all the Cappies out there, especially, those going into their Saturn return. I actually have some Capricorn clients who are also headed into their Saturn return at the same time. And while that sounds god-awful, the Sagittarius, to be frank about it, I think that home field advantage will serve them well. They already know this, because they're already... So I have Cap rising, you're Capricorn dominant people. I think if we change the way we use astrological language, it'll fit better, So when I work with clients, I don't say, oh, because you're a Capricorn, and Saturn was Capricorn, that's going to be. I say, hey, if you're Capricorn dominant, you are Capricorn, have a Capricorn moon, has a Capricorn rising, maybe a stellium in Capricorn, even if your sun or moon aren't there. That's Capricorn dominant, so you're going to feel this.
Now, what about us Cancers? Because speaking of baseball, I was watching that World Series, and Jose Canseco, he's a Cancer with the Aries moon, and he had just come off one of the most phenomenal seasons in baseball history. It was a 40-40 season, first player to hit 40 home runs, steal 40 bases, hit 300. He did everything. Then I'm watching the 89 series, and he's injured half the time, and the same thing in 90. And I was like, well, wait a minute, he's a Cancer with the Aries moon, 10 degrees Cancer, 10 degrees Cancer sun, 10 degrees Aries moon. So that Saturn would have been opposing that. Would that be? Is that?
Interesting.
And he was doing probably, steroids, and that was when that A's team was there. That era, that him and McGuire, and that was kind of when all that got started. And then I was like, well, if you were doing that stuff and you weren't particularly responsible, Saturn and Capricorn, you're going to get injuries, and that was what happened the next 89. He had that great season in 88. Saturn was in Sag. Then 89, 90, Saturn goes into Capricorn, makes all those harsh aspects to his sun and his moon, and then he's injured all the time.
Well, that's a great example of this is why astrological forecasting matters, which is a fine line between forecasting and prediction, right?
Right.
So, especially with Saturn, to lay your groundwork years prior to a heavy Saturn transit coming through, you will automatically fare better than the alternative, right? So knowing ahead of time that your hurricane is coming, I'm in Florida, I gotta use hurricane lingo, and knowing that so far in advance to help you prepare versus being completely blindsided by it because you just ignore the fact that this hurricane was coming or that the potential of that weather, that forecast was on deck.
So like prediction would be like, oh, there's a hurricane coming and it's gonna hit this particular street and XYZ is gonna happen. Forecasting is like, well, we know we're in hurricane country and these are the months that the hurricanes tend to happen, and maybe you should make sure to have whatever preparations you need in place. Is that the difference?
Right. So for example, knowing Saturn's in Capricorn, we also know Saturn will follow in approximately 2.5 years into Aquarius. Well, where's Aquarius? Maybe for someone personally, and what are you going to do during Saturn and Capricorn to prepare for Saturn moving into Aquarius, where it also rules? It's a whole different energy. So same but not the same. The joys of Aquarius.
Now, what about these people? There's a sub-generation. You probably have had one or two as clients by now. They're born like 89, 90, and depending on what point they're born, some of them have, you bring up the chart and you're like, oh my lord, it's like 8 planets in Capricorn. I don't know if it's 8 planets.
Oh, right.
If they have like the moon, or they have rising, or they the Saturn had retrograded back in, or Venus or anything. I saw one person had like 6 or 7. Everything was in Capricorn. And that sub-generation is now about to have its Saturn return.
Oh, absolutely. And the clients that I've met that do have that you want people on the rise. You want people that are changing the game, the way the game is played. It's giving me a whole new perception on the Capricorn archetype. Because while the basics of, the Saturn backbone and the, bit of melancholy or serious tone that they have, every one of these in that particular age group are really building this future foundation that is not necessarily lined up with their parents' generation. So we could also go into the psychology of like parents and children and how things change. And, everything's multi-layered.
This is a generation, they would have been coming into the world right when the Berlin Wall was coming down and the Soviet Union was collapsing. The first web browser had I think that was when Tim Berners-Lee started the first web browser, was 89. The internet didn't get really going until a few years later, but that was, once you had that web browser, was when things could that enabled everything that came later. What else happened?
It's so hot that you know all this, whether you're reading it or it's from memory.
No, it's just off my memory.
Good Lord.
Because I've been obsessing over it because it's going to oppose all my Cancer planets. So I've been doing trying not to pull a Jose Canseco. I've been doing a lot of stretch because I was watching him play on these YouTube videos from that time. I was like,
Jose Canseco was it. He was awesome
at that time, and he actually, people always think of his name as being synonymous with steroids, which it is. He was the godfather of steroids in baseball. But what he did also is everybody saw what he was doing. Everybody kind of suspected that maybe there was something awry, something else other than just working out and eating right. But a lot of people, myself included, I was about 13 at that time. I thought, well, what if I just work out and eat right? Could I get like half the results that he got, So like everybody got into working out, which in baseball was, lifting weights was considered almost like illegal. Coaches would prevent players. They say, no, you're not allowed to lift weights because they had this idea it would just make you all inflexible. But then Canseco goes out, hits 40 home runs and steals 40 bases, plays great defense. And people were like, well, wait a minute. So like it wasn't just the steroids, it was the modern day conditioning, and he kind of inadvertently brought baseball into the modern day. That was the start of all that, was people seeing him and being blown away with what he did. Now he kind of turned into a fool later in his he could have used the services of an astrologer right after that 40-40 season. He was at the peak of his career, and if he had been able to talk to Heather Renee Horton, maybe would have gotten straightened out. Would have had 500 home runs.
I'm telling you, I'm all about sending people on the straight path.
Yeah, because you could say, hey, you just had this 40-40 season. You're 24 years old. You're running around in a Porsche, getting in all this trouble. I think you need to do some more stretching for your back, because you're going to get Capricorn's the backbone, and you're going to have some back injuries if you don't get aligned.
Absolutely.
Maybe you need to go see a chiropractor.
Which is great advice just in general for everyone, regardless on your Capricorn placements or if you even understand astrology at all. Strengthening your muscles, not to be strong and buff, but to protect the to protect the bone, the structure of the body, the back, the foundation. That's good advice for anyone with Saturn and Capricorn.
Like that, the Candlestick Park, that was the stadium they retrofitted that survived the earthquake without anybody dying, and that stadium has Saturn. It was built when Saturn was in Capricorn, so when it survived that earthquake, that was its Saturn return. And they had just 8-9 months earlier had they did the equivalent of. They did to the stadium what you're suggesting people do to their physical bodies, which is get it not like to look all like you got 8-pack abs or whatever, but to be structurally sound.
Absolutely. So, yeah, the idea of I came damn close.
Oh, you can't, Miss Horton. You're the reason why now I have to warn everybody. No bad words. We are on terrestrial radio.
I know. I got so close. I figured damn is a mainstream word, so I'm still okay there.
I think you can say that.
I think we're okay there, but whew, that was close.
All right. Sun, Mars, and Sag. It's like,
oh God, it's awful.
You can't keep the mouth. The mouth is gonna go. Anyways, continue on.
So you know I'm a therapist, right?
Yes, yes.
So I'm the therapist that has no filter. So it's hard for me to.
You should have a reality show. You should have a reality show. That would be.
You're not the first person to.
That would be hilarious. Maybe some Major League Baseball player comes in or something, and you need to.
I need some good liability insurance.
So you need to get off. You need to get off the juice and get on a stretching program. You need to get on to Pilates.
So, the point being, things are not about to get real. They're real, and it's. And a lot of people aren't going to like that. Thank God I do have the Capricorn dominant natally, because all my Sagittarius would have a hard time.
Well, but Saturn's off all your Sagittarius, though. Wouldn't that be a Saturn in the first? When I had Saturn, I have a friend who is Capricorn rising, not an astrologer, and she's all freaking out. I said, well, when Saturn was in Leo on my first, that was when I had a website that got pretty popular. Like, I don't remember it being bad, and the stuff that was bad was kind of my own doing, So I don't remember, like, the external stuff that happened was all pretty positive, I have to say.
When I advise clients, for those that have Saturn moving through that part of the chart, if you struggle with your weight, great time to lose weight. It'll just fall right off. If ever you dreamt of putting on that business suit and being that next level in your presentation for your career, here it is. I did move to a window office. So,
oh, you got a corner office, you're saying?
I did. I got a corner window office.
Wow. Now, when did that happen? Was that when it was in
When
Sag?
Jupiter, on the day that Jupiter sat on my midheaven.
Oh, there you go. So
the owner, yep.
The
owner of the practice said something to me that within an hour of Jupiter peaking on my chart, as Saturn was starting to inch closer towards my ascendant. So.
Oh, well, that's a perfect analogy. So you got a corner office, and so you got a bump in status, midheaven, and your ascendant. So awesome.
Absolutely.
Now, what about me? It's in my 6th house. It's going to be opposing all my Cancer planets, and I'm.
It's in your 6th?
Yeah.
Is that what you just said?
Work and health. I did just buy some shelving to get all my stuff for work, or super organized, and that it was.
So, my advice to anyone with Saturn going through the 6th is make all the doctor's appointments that you've been putting. Oh, there's another good one.
The dentist,
right? Yeah.
The dentist. I go to a chiropractor regularly, but then I also want to go. There's all these other structural modalities like Z Health. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's like it connects it in with the brain. So if you have an imbalance in your body, like one side is stronger than the other, it can actually be the brain may be messed up. And so they kind of get, it's kind of complicated or not complicated. I don't really know how to explain it. I'm just fascinated by all this type of stuff. So I'm going to definitely, check it out.
And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I know I've had the clients that come in, Saturn's in their 6th, and they're like, I am so sick. Doctors can't figure out what's wrong with me.
Well,
I'll tell you what's going on. Saturn's moving through your 6th, and when's the last time you had this checkup and this checkup and this checkup?
Well,
I don't have time for that.
Yeah, well, I've been, working in schools and gotten sick quite a bit, and I actually thought, well, maybe it's better to get that out, be sick for a couple years as a substitute than as a full-time teacher, because if worse comes to worse, I can take time off. If I give enough, enough of a warning or whatever. Which you can't really do when you're a full-time teacher. I mean, you can, but not really. You have an allotted number of days, but good luck taking days off.
Well, and there's the other thing. If you're going to continue doing that, I expect you to be doing more of it, not that will feel good. So it's different from a Jupiter transit where it feels like an abundance of work.
What I am doing is that shelving is there so everything can be hyper-organized, because I usually get home and I'm exhausted, and I want to try to work 5 days a week, 5 days for the entire school year. so that it's basically the same as a regular teacher in terms of the physical demands. Because that would, I feel like that would prepare me. But in order to do that, it's like I get home on some days. This past year, let's say I'm home at 4, I just immediately fall asleep and am up back at like 8 or 9 to eat and then go back to bed. And so I'm trying to get everything organized so that, you save 15 minutes here and 15 minutes there and 15 minutes here and 15 minutes there, and pretty soon you have an extra 1 to 2 hours per day to actually work out or to do, to do whatever. So.
Well, and then with Saturn opposing your Cancer stuff, your energy, your vitality is going to be squashed.
Well, hopefully not. I mean, when it was the worst was when Neptune was opposite my Mars. I was really tired all the time. So but can't Saturn fortify that? I think I actually did get into baseball last time Saturn was in Capricorn. That was 89. I think that was when I started playing.
What were you 10?
Was I what?
I said, what were you 10?
Yeah. So I've been trying to figure out what would be the equivalent of that these days as an adult. Pilates or something? Talking to Heather Renee Horton on the air?
Awesome.
Well, that's a Saturnian event.
I very well could be Saturn in the flesh, I gotta tell you.
Well, it is your chart ruler.
Down here.
It is your chart ruler.
It's my chart. Yeah, it's my chart ruler.
Yes.
So
we're gonna end on that. I may have to do a little editing of this before it gets posted on the internet, Ms. Horton. I do appreciate your advice, though. But
awesome.
But it's top of the hour, so we're gonna have to call it a wrap. And
well, thank you for having me.
All right, thank you for calling in on your vacation, your Sagittarian, your Super Sag vacation. By the way, first action film of all time was a Sagittarius. It was a bank robber horse cowboy film, silent film.
Really?
Yeah, it was a multiple. I think it was a Sag with a Taurus moon. Actually, now that if I recall correctly, yeah.
Wonder Woman's a Sag with a Taurus.
I know, and I'm the one who brought that to your attention.
I know, you love me. Thank you.
Okay, so I will let you know. I'll get this posted next week or so.
Awesome.
All right. All right, so we're going to take a quick musical break for about a minute, and then when we come back, we'll have Jason Fleming, Sagittarian Mind, on to discuss the Chiron return of hip-hop music. But we have Jason on today specifically to talk about hip-hop having its Chiron return, which I think is going to be a pretty interesting topic. So, Jason, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a while.
Yeah, I think you were one of the first guests on the show.
Yeah, it's good to hear your voice though, because there's been a lot of things that have gone on since we actually talked voice to voice.
Yeah, like anything. So, hey, Jason, anything interesting in the news the last few years?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. But things are going good. How are things going with you?
Pretty good. I can't personally complain. The state of the world is a different story.
Yeah.
But speaking of that, I was looking, Chiron's in Pisces, and I was looking at recent events, trying to figure out, what's the Chiron and Pisces element of that? Because, of course, it's going to go into Chiron, and I was looking at it back last time Chiron was in Aries to look for examples, and I realized hip-hop. Of course, you did great article on the astrology of hip hop, and I realized Chiron, hip hop has Chiron in Aries. So I thought, well, maybe you'd be a good person to bring on to, kind of give us an idea of what might be in store, and specifically using hip hop to illuminate what might be in store.
Yeah, that actually, when you asked about that, I actually went back to look at the chart, just to see what else was going on with it. And, when you talk about Chiron being in Aries in general, you talk about just how hip-hop was born. You think about it. I mean, you look at Aries as being, the first sign of the zodiac and the initiator, and basically saying, I'm here and I'm alive. And, I think hip-hop was born because there was a certain element of society that did not necessarily feel that their existence was being acknowledged. First off, and then I looked at that, and in the chart, it actually makes an opposition to Uranus, which can also state something born out of rebellion, also genius, because, literally there is such an innovative aspect to hip hop. And I'll argue because it was born out of that type of dynamic. So, you have all of that, and then competition as well, But, once again, when you look at Chiron, you look at wounds also. And you look at the very same thing that contributes to the genius of hip hop has also contributed to its wounding as well. Because with Mars, you look at competition, which Mars is right there next to Chiron in the chart. You also look at violence, and you look at, a hyper-masculine aspect of it as well. So there are a whole lot of things going on. But what I'm hoping this return signals is a return to competition. A return to people making other people better through that aspect. And, I'm really speaking as an astrologer, and I'm speaking as a fan also.
Right.
Because, you look at the history and you look at the things that have gone on, and I think some of the most creative and dynamic work has been born out of the battling aspect.
Yes.
Or people putting out quality material to make other people better.
Right.
I've heard countless artists talk about how when another artist put their work out, they knew they had to step it up because, the whole world is basically reeling from their creative work, and they know that in order to equal that or to top it, they have to come in a certain way. And now I think it looks like there's some complacency there, because there's become a formula for people to do things, and it just does not seem as competitive. I mean, they started up a battle arena, basically an arm of hip hop, a battle rap arm of hip hop. But I guess I'm speaking more along the lines of just what we see from day to day.
Right. Now, for the astrologically, for those whose astrological literacy has yet to fully express itself. So, if I recall, hip hop is a Leo with a Capricorn moon.
That is correct.
So, for folks who are wondering, wait a minute, you guys are talking about Aries. If it's a Leo with a Cap moon, what's this Chiron? What does Chiron symbolize in a chart, and what does it mean? What does it mean when it's in Aries, say, versus where in Pisces, which is where it's at right now, but pretty soon it's going to move into Aries.
Right, and I think when things get into Pisces, there's this dissolving of things, and then it's this reemergence when it comes back into Aries. And that's what I think. I think that there has to be this chaos before this storm, so to speak. And I think a lot of the, and even you could say that with Pisces, there's this relaxation of things. But I think the storm comes back heats back up when things go into Aries. You know, it's a symbolizing of action taking place, you know, of spearheading, of leading, of getting things back to where they need to be. And I think that hip hop has, you know, and I guess, you know, when you talk about the wounded healer, which is the mythology or the symbolism that Chiron is attached to, I think that in order for hip hop really to heal, that type of dynamic has to come back because it's gotten very listless, you know, which can be something that can be attributed to or correlated with Pisces. Right. You know, kind of the floating aspect or the spaced out aspect. And hopefully, I think when it has that return, it will return back to this is how it was all initiated. Right. This is how it all started. And hopefully the same genius and competitive spirit that accompanying its beginning will reemerge.
Right. So some folks, I'd heard this thing, what was it? I work as a substitute teacher, and sometimes the kids will ask me if I know who certain rappers are, and they're I know, and some of them I didn't know. I didn't know who this thing called the Gucci Gang. They all would talk about it, and I had no idea what it was. And
I'm stuck. And you know, this is a self-admitted thing. You know, I had to admit it to myself and say, look, I'm stuck in a, you know, and it's not that I don't have anything particularly negative to say about anything that's out now. But I will say that for myself, you know, there's just a strong preference for, you know, certain elements of hip hop that I don't see as much.
Very well said. Yeah, I had to look it up because they kept asking, you know, and I finally looked it up. Now, there was a pretty illuminating New York Times article about the new underground rap, and I guess that's what this Gucci Gang thing has evolved out of. And, you know, I don't want to be a fuddy-duddy, like, oh, it was better in my day than it is now. But But I did notice that Chiron and Pisces, there's definitely more of a. I remember they kept talking about taking Xanax, and I was like, I was like that. Wait, Xanax is what you take when you have anxiety and you need to mellow out, right? I mean, I'm not sure, but I thought, wow, it's so Piscean, like
right,
you know.
Right, and you know, inclusion is Piscean too.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, but see, here's the thing. And I was saying this earlier, but I was making a reference to astrology, but it's really the same kind of thing that. Well, I'll actually reference what I was saying about astrology. You know, I hear a lot of hip hop artists now who are very lyrical say that with what's out now, there should be a separate category of hip hop for, you know, for what they call mumble rap and, you know, and stuff like that. And so I was making an astrological correlation that, you know, sometimes people tend to do certain things in astrology, you know, or certain things and put it all under the banner of astrology, let's say.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. And so, but, you know, the same thing that helps hip hop, you know, which is the inclusion, because no one is left out, can actually hurt it too. When it's so broad that it's like you can do anything and call it hip hop. Right.
I did notice that in that New York Times article. I was like, this isn't exactly my shtick, this new form of hip hop, but there were a few things about it I liked, and it did seem like it was a little more, I guess you could say, inclusive. Like it seemed like anybody could just join in, and so I thought, well, I definitely have to give it credit for that. And I just figured, you know, me being a little older now, I just, you know, you always prefer whatever was going on when you were a kid. But now that I think about it, yeah, there was an inclusive component to it. No, it didn't seem like anybody was being made to stay out of the arena, so to speak.
Sure. And, you know, with Pisces, again, on the, let's say, the maladaptive side, there can be a confusion when it comes to boundaries and when it comes to barriers and when it comes to even definitions. You know, when I think about something that's very clearly defined, I think about, let's say, Saturn.
Right.
Okay? You know, there's no mystery to its definition. But then when you talk about Pisces, it's nebulous,
Right.
in the way that can't really be pinned down. And so I think that kind of energy has, been permeating through hip hop. It's like, you can't label me as this, you can't label me as that, but sometimes definitions are helpful as well.
Right.
Whereas Aries says, I want to, Aries comes out and says, this is who I am. There's no, it's like really boom out of the gate, very assertively. And I think that some people are going to get back to that. They look at everything that's going on now. I mean, I'm talking about from an artistic point of view. They look at everything that's going on and they say, well, I think I have to show people what's going on. It's like, for example, I saw, I like The Roots. That's one of the groups that I like, from Philly. And Black Thought, who is an MC for The Roots, he was on Hot 97, which is a station, a New York station, and he did a freestyle for I forgot how long it was. But basically, his thing was like, I have to reemerge and I have to show people that, I can still do this, because of what is put out there, in its prevalence now. But back in, let's say, 12, 13 years ago, there was no question about this person's lyrical ability or anything like that.
Right.
But, because of hip hop's change, it's like I heard, who was it? Guy who plays for the Lakers. It's Ball. I forgot his dad's name. But LeVar's son. And he was like, nobody listens to Nas anymore. That was his comment.
Yeah.
So, so then when you get with the mixing of everything and everybody, there becomes a blurring, of that. So I think it's very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. So healing through battle rap. So, because I'm thinking about it, it's going to be in my 9th house, which is like higher education, philosophy, publishing. So now you got me thinking. I always take these things and I try to apply them to my own chart or other people's charts. So healing, which is Chiron, through battle rap.
Then let's say through competition, because look, right. I remember, which Nas, admittedly, he's my favorite hip hop artist, but I remember he was struggling for a while because, he put out an album. It was, received lukewarmly. And so then he gets into this battle with Jay-Z. And basically it reignited his career in that sense. And I think the competition made that better. And we don't know what would have happened had he not faced that competition.
Right.
I mean, there's been some notorious hip hop battles that have born very creative things. And I really stopped following them after that, because now it's like people who it's like people that I don't really know.
Right.
And they're like, ooh, so-and-so said this about this person and that person. And then I don't really have like a desire to listen to the music or anything. But that was just something that was very clear in terms of referencing. It brought out the best of both people.
Right. You always bring your A game when you know there's some some competition. You always step it up a little, at least a little bit more. And I don't know why, because there's times where I've been in situations where it's not a competitive situation, and I kind of bring my B game. And then if there's a competitive situation, you do just naturally up your game, even though you'd like to think you always bring your A game. You don't really go 105% unless there's some competition there.
Well, I've heard artists say, especially, let's say, artists that have been on the same record together, and I've heard artists say, after I heard so-and-so's verse, I wanted to go back and rewrite mine, right. Because it's really, it even happened with LL Cool J and Cannabis, back then when, Cannabis, he was just coming on the scene. He wrote his verse, and it was just, it scorched the mic. LL had a little thing with it, and he had to go. He went back and he changed his verse.
Right.
But that's the kind of thing that I think we need. To really. You've heard artists like, Nas. I've heard it talking about. He's like, wow, when Biggie came out with that, I knew that I had to do X, Y, and Z, or vice versa. You don't really hear that anymore. You don't hear a lot of people saying, wow, when I heard so-and-so's record, I knew that, I had to go back and I had to rework some things and it brought more, creativity out of me or what have you.
Right. Now, do you think the hip-hop may play more of a role in the upcoming electoral cycles? Because, I don't need to explain what's going on right now, but, do you think we've got the midterms? And I think Chiron might be in Aries by the midterms. Yeah, wait, I think so. It goes into Aries and it backs into Pisces and it goes back into Aries. I haven't checked the exact dates, but certainly, if not the midterms, certainly the 2020 elections.
Sure. I think that is a very viable idea. Especially just based upon what's transpired since November 8th of last year, which is a horrific night for me.
The reason it popped in my head is you mentioned LeVar Ball, and I realized that there is this the current administration seems to like to spend time arguing with people on Twitter. It tends to be people of color, football players or basketball players. I don't know if they've been anything with rappers per se. But it's interesting. It's interesting that the football players and LeVar Ball. Eminem had a whole thing, and I didn't really see anything. I know he did. I hadn't really paid attention.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that Eminem had a whole thing, and I didn't see any real anything toward him.
Oh yeah, you're right. There was no response to Eminem.
Yeah.
But what if LL Cool J came out with something? Would there have been a major Twitter beef?
Yeah. So it's interesting, but I definitely think that they should understand and recognize that it could be another case of the thing I talked about, how hip hop was born in the first place, saying, "Hey, we exist."
Right.
And I think that was a fight because when you look at Chiron and you look at, it is that recognition of saying I'm here, and it's like, okay, we're here now, and we need to mobilize to make sure that, let's say, this type of situation doesn't present itself and succeed again.
Right.
Let's say that.
Now I know that I was looking at world events for the last time Chiron went into Aries, and Martin Luther King was assassinated almost the day that it went in, and I think Malcolm X would have been. I think if he was, I forget if he was assassinated before or after Martin Luther King, but if it was after, that means both of those would have been Chiron and Aries woundings.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to thinking, well, then hip hop. Those obviously weren't the only two things that gave rise to hip hop, but I thought that's almost in the genetic backdrop of. If you look at the chart of hip hop, I always like to look at what's in the family line metaphorically. And so this is a movement or a cultural phenomenon, and Chiron and Aries woundings to the leadership or woundings to the head. And I thought, I wonder if those events, the civil rights movement, kind of having its legs cut out, its knees knocked out from it, sort of had something to do with the rise of hip hop. If that was a response to the civil rights movement. Being
well, you with that Chiron, with that opposition to Uranus, which is almost it's very close. Chiron's is at 20 and Uranus is at 19. I could definitely see that. So because you talk about rebellion, you talk about revolution, you talk about change, you talk about all those things. There was a very interesting, which Melanie Reinhardt has a good book on Chiron, for anybody who is interested in that. But there was a passage from that book that I was looking at. And I was thinking about hip hop in relation to it when I talked about the, what has become of it in a negative sense. And, there's a passage where she says, she talks about Chiron and Aries. And she says, grandiose displays of bravado and fighting spirit compensate for the pain, self-doubt, and fear underneath, which can drive us into a repeating cycle of futile and self-destructive endeavors.
God, it's
it's like you can't get any more you can't really get any more on point than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because hip hop was born out of that kind of thing.
Right.
Struggle, strife, violence. But at the same time, it serves as a creative force for people to actually heal themselves by picking up a microphone and telling other people about all of that.
Right. Totally. Now, do you think there's are there any anybody in hip hop you might think has political aspirations? I haven't really been.
Oh, wow.
Do you know of anybody? Because
I do not off the top of my head.
I'm just thinking.
I just know Diddy wants to buy the Panthers.
Well, I was gonna say, speaking of Diddy, the last time I remember hip hop being more overtly involved in an election, I think it was either 2000 or 2004, and Diddy was
like
on.
Rock the Vote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought, well, okay, but I think this time around it's a little bit different. Also, a lot of the people who grew up listening to hip hop, people your age, my age, a little younger, a little older, are now moving into our 40s, and either are going to begin running for office if they haven't already, or they begin to get a little more active in politics, where they may not have been in their 20s or 30s. And I know people were like, "Oh, Obama's like the hip hop president because he listens to hip hop," and I was like, maybe, maybe. But I mean, something a little more overt.
Right.
It has its Chiron return.
Sure. No, I totally understand that, and I think it would have to be in a space where people would, I don't know. I see it as being probably more at the local level than the national level, because when you get to a broader level, people tend not to understand exactly where you're coming from, and right. The first thing they do with people who have political aspirations is look at their past, and they'll say, well, in 1995 when you recorded this, what did you mean?
Right.
What did you mean when you said this about whomever?
Right.
And that's usually a hot button right there.
Although,
and it can be.
Maybe less so these days, because some of the things that are coming out with
other
people, like if somebody said something bad about somebody in 1995, that's like would be the least of our concerns at this point.
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, look, how many people have probably rapped that line of our president in that Access Hollywood,
exactly.
thing. Yeah, somebody's probably said it in a rhyme, or what have you. So, but once again, there's perception, and it depends on who's saying what.
Right.
So, that's another issue.
Right. So we're at the bottom of the hour, so we're gonna have to wrap up. But basically, healing through competition is the takeaway. Hip hop was about healing through competition, and it sounds like that might be what we're collectively going through, healing through metaphorically battle rapping, if not actual battle rapping.
Right. I think getting back to its essence as that and healthy competition is going to really help hip hop in that manner.
That reminds me of one thing. You're doing an Astro Toast. Is that a response to anything?
That's right. Well, it's an Astro Toast because I got tired of seeing. Now I guess there's this thing on Twitter where people say, roast me about my chart.
Yeah.
So they post the chart, they say roast me, and people look at it and they say, oh, I see all these Libra planets. Can you ever make a decision? Ha ha ha, or what have you. And, I just want to try to create some balance and say a toast is more of a sign of respect for people. So what I was going to do is on New Year's Eve is take out, a couple hours and, give people in 140 to 280 characters something they could take away with them about the chart constructively.
I kind of like that, because the thing, I'm okay with getting roasted myself, but the problem is people could get you're looking at somebody's chart that's basically like their like psychological genetics in a way.
Sure.
And you're on sensitive territory there. So if I cracked a joke about somebody I know, who I know in the physical world, you kind of know what would be funny, but still kind of a sign of respect, right? Because you can mock somebody, make fun of somebody, but still, like, it's almost like it's still a good aspect of their personality or something. Versus, I'm just concerned people could really get their feelings hurt And I like the Astro Toast because everybody likes to hear something nice. Everybody,
Right.
needs a little
Right.
boost. So Astro Toast.
And it's not like I'm like Mr. King Astrologer out here, but you could say that the people who are doing this might not have the astrological background to be doing so.
Right, because once it becomes a hashtag, everybody's going to be doing it, and you may have folks who inadvertently hurt people's feelings. And
right.
I'm not against it because, like I said, if somebody wants to roast,
like I said, yeah.
But
I saw some professional astrologers doing it, but the difference is that, I probably I know some of these people, and also what they were saying is very legitimate in terms of what they didn't like roast the person themselves.
Right.
Their comments were more like things that a real astrologer would see in a chart, from an aesthetic standpoint.
Right.
So, no problem with that at all.
Right.
But it's like, hey, I like astrology. I'm going to create a Twitter account, and then I'm just going to start roasting people.
Right.
That's kind of tough. And some people are impressionable. They don't know that you don't necessarily know,
So Astro, if you want to get in on the Astro, it's hashtag Astro Toast, and you're doing this on New Year's?
On New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve.
Not sure exactly like what period of time, but I think that, everybody deserves that, and they need to know that, you can work with your chart too. It's not this thing that you're just doomed,
right?
In your life, and despite what some other people, despite what some other people might have told you. But it's like somebody said to me, it's like some of the web, as far as astrology is concerned, is like WebMD. It's like, oh wow, my finger hurt.
No, right?
It's like you're gonna die.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I am one of those people that I have spent time on WebMD, and it always happens like a 3 or 4 day weekend where you can't get to a real doctor for another 4 days. Like Friday night.
Everything. It's like everything. So then you look at aspects. You might want to Google an aspect you have, and then it's like the same thing. It's like you'll never have a good relationship in your life.
Yeah, I've done this also with transits. So I'll look up a transit, and I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be terrible. And then I think back to other transits. I'm like, that really wasn't that bad. I don't really remember anything bad happening. I mean, I maybe it's a memory, so it's low resolution at this point. But I don't remember anything terrible happened last time this transit happened. But astrology like WebMD for sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
okay. Well, this will go up. This is scheduled. The interview part is going to get incorporated, of course, into a podcast. But the raw interview part, I think I'm going to have up on New Year's Day. So if you're still doing the Astro Toast on New Year's Day, maybe people can get into that, or they can start toasting other people.
Yeah, right.
Have a lot of Astro toasting. Yeah. Also, there's a lot of there's become a thing now. Speaking of like battle rapping, of like saying bad stuff about signs or whatever, which is I'm totally cool with in a limited amount. But what happens is one person does it, it's funny, it's awesome, and then it kind of can snowball throughout the internet. I'm not against it, but
I've had to just check myself and say that, if I have any strong feelings about it, ask myself why I would. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, just like for my own mental health, it's like, why would I get up in arms about this kind of thing? I mean, so, and you see that a lot. But what I did say, and I tweeted that today, is that, I think people should understand. I think they're getting to understand that strong feelings about zodiac signs doesn't really correlate to anybody having astrological knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because sometimes people think because you're very opinionated,
right,
on the signs, that like you know a lot of astrology, and it's easy to be opinionated on anything.
Right.
I mean, especially if it's just limited to the people that you know.
Right. So strength of your opinion is not reflective of the depth of your research or knowledge. Right. Exactly. And I think if people start to think about that, then I think people can get a lot more out of astrology if they stop and think about that. Got it. Great. Okay, so Astro Toast, New Year's, and maybe into New Year's Day, and I'll
probably go after midnight.
Right. Sure. Okay, Astro Toast. Okay, well, Jason, thank you for coming on. Much appreciated. And
Hey, always a pleasure, man.
yeah, and have a great 2018. Let's make it. I gotta say, I think 2017 was better than 2016, and hopefully 2018 will be better than 2017. So.
Right, that's why I chose New Year's Eve for this, to try to go into 2018 with, on this kind of note.
Yeah, that's a great idea, actually. Yeah. All right. I will talk to you later.
Okay.
Okay.
See you. Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, that is it for episode 1 of the Hexagon Astrology podcast. Up next is installment 2 of the proprietaries. So, until next time, enjoy.